O3C Cybersecurity Podcast.
Welcome back to the O3C Cloud Security Podcast. And today here with me, I have Olav as my co-host. Well, once again.
I'm back, Håkon, and this time you actually got the cloud word in as well, so I'm super happy and excited about this episode.
And Olav, why are you the co-host for today's episode?
It's most likely because I'm an experienced Go engineer, writing Go code, Golang, you know.
And we're going to talk a bit about Go security today.
It's concurrent, you know, so yeah, workers, that's what's up.
Yeah, so today we have a very exciting guest, and for today's topic, we are talking about cloud security automation. We've been speaking a lot on this podcast about the ability to automate security work once you move to the cloud, and how high performing a security team can be once they start adopting the cloud themselves. And I was out a couple months ago and had some very interesting discussions with a very talented engineer whose name was Audun Blichfeldt Mo, and he works as a senior security engineer at Remarkable. So I invited him on the podcast, and here you are today.
All right. Well, thank you. Yeah, it was a pleasure going out and talking about Go and security a few weeks back. So thank you for having me.
It's all our pleasure. You have a lot of experience with automating security. That's, of course, why we have you here today. But how did you end up in the position you are today?
Sure. Yeah. So my background is as a programmer, as a developer. I actually sort of stumbled into being a developer as well, and I stumbled from development to being in security. I like to point out that my only actual formal education is in East Asian art history and in nothing else. But at university, I got involved in the hackathon scene. I got involved in Python programming. Just sort of spending weekends making stupid things and sometimes winning a little bit of money. And then I sort of fell from that into a startup. I worked at that startup for a while, for multiple years. Then joined Finn.no, a digital marketplace in Norway. And I worked there as a programmer for a while. Worked as a consultant a little bit until I landed in my role in Remarkable, where I also worked as an application developer, focusing on Go and focusing on cloud. And that was a really fun experience, sort of growing with that company from being fairly small to now being a medium-sized sort of scale-up company. And in that time, from sort of going from being a little startup that's really hustling to survive and now moving towards being a more serious company in the big wide world, there was an opportunity to specialize inside of security. I had a sort of meeting of two different events that was very rewarding, very fun, where I had the opportunity to go into security right as I sort of started doing CTFs, hacking, really getting into, sort of following some vulnerability researchers, and seeing that this stuff is really exciting and very, very, intense, and that there's a growing need. So I had an opportunity to join my very talented colleague Åsmund in Remarkable, and now we're still a team of two a couple of years later. But it's been a great journey, and since we're a small team inside of a large organization, we really have to hustle. And we work very hard to make sure that we automate everything that we can automate, to make sure that we get as much value out of the two of us as we possibly can. So that's sort of where my perspective starts, going all the way from being just a hacker at university to going to development, and then going into software development focused application security.
Well, that's very interesting perspectives to have with us on the podcast. If we can jump back a bit, how did you have any interactions with the security teams when you were a developer And how did you feel those interactions were?
Ooh, nice one.
Yeah, so the companies that I've worked in that had security teams, my only interactions with them were really about sort of installations of EDR on my laptop and MDM installations. I hadn't actually met anyone who worked specifically with the sort of stuff that I do today before I got engaged in the field. So it's I think in Norway it's a fairly niche type of role. So I just hadn't really met anyone like that. I'd met people who were focused primarily on sort of building security, laptop security, and that's a slightly different, or it's a significantly different sort of corporate culture than development culture. So it can be a little bit of a clash. So what I've sort of strived to do is try to incorporate the mindset of some of these really great IT security people that I've met about what's really important, guarding and locking down what can be guarded and locked down, while utilizing my sort of knowledge of developer culture and insider knowledge there, of what the experience can be to be on the receiving end of things.
I'm just going to put you right on the spot 5 minutes into the podcast. What are your feelings about removing local administrative privileges of developers on developer endpoints?
I think that's generally really counterproductive to do. That's been my experience. Because development work requires you to install and uninstall a lot of applications all the time. So certainly full removal is not something that I would ever advocate. There are methods of, I know that there are some methods of sort of temporarily removing admin access and only granting it exactly when needed. If that's possible to provision automatically, that's great. If it's a manual process, that's so painful as to not be worth it, I would say.
Yeah, and you start off with the correct answer. Oh, but yeah, from that background and what you mentioned about only being 2 in the team, and automating everything or as much as you can. Like, when do you decide what you need to automate? Is there like, and everybody has probably seen the XKDC about when to automate, right? Like, when do you decide this security thing that we do all the time needs to be automated because we can't be doing it manually?
I think primarily, I think you sort of can measure the importance of being of automating and measuring security across 2 sort of axes. The most obvious one is business value. How critical is this particular asset to the continued existence of the business? But there's another angle that I think is kind of interesting to pursue, which is that when you talk to developers, they're really concerned about quality, about shipping things that they're proud of. That's a pretty universal experience, as far as I can tell, at least. That's really sort of core to their identity. I ship good things. And one of the things that they struggle with, or some developers struggle with, is measuring the quality of what they're shipping. And importantly, also measuring in a way that's not only important to them, but also important to the management and stakeholders. And security automation fits a really neat hole there, because vulnerabilities are bugs. They're stuff that is just, something is broken in your code, so it's a measure of quality. But it's also about reducing a risk that your manager understands, even if they're not technical. So you can sort of bridge a gap there that I think, so that's a way of, that I like to think about what to automate, or sort of what to secure, at least. So when it comes to what to automate, you typically go from a sort of, you start by identifying what it is that you need to secure, and you threat model that, and you take actions based on that threat model, so that you go down the sort of path of what mitigations can be put in place that are reasonable here. And then you decide your automations from there. Typically, the easy stuff is really nice to take early. So, put some static analysis in. If nothing else, anything is better than nothing. So if you have nothing, put something, and update your dependencies, right? So that's sort of the obvious stuff that you do for almost every application. And you get into deeper things with dynamic application security testing, Dust, which is really valuable, but much harder to configure in a good way. You can go into SBOM generation to get really like tracking of like, I've shipped this version of software before. Do we need to go back and tell all our customers to turn that off? Or so it's a bunch of complex stuff to get into once you sort of really go down that path.
And Olav, maybe you can chime in on because I heard 2 words that you often mention: business value. So how do someone like Audun in an organization go to their manager or whoever and kind of argue the business value of automating this and maybe figuring out the business value of what they're trying to automate?
Well, I think if Audun can make sure that the developers can use less time on security and more time on producing code that has a business value, for example, some new functionality, and have I think you mentioned it earlier in episodes, if I'm a dev and I'm in a happy mood and my computer works and I can ship code and I can do my job without being nagged or stuff not working, I'm most likely more motivated and therefore writing better code as well. So just making that paid path, making it easy for the software engineer to actually write code, and of course giving him enough time to write code with high quality. Because if you write code with high quality, you have less technical depth, you have less vulnerabilities, you have less attack paths, and you most likely also have better business functionality. I think it's not what you asked me, Håkon, but I think we see sometimes that, and that's also somewhat a question I would like to ask, that devs are so pushed on getting new functionality out, which leads to taking shortcuts, which again leads to low quality code, which again leads to technical depth and security issues, etc. What do you think about that, Håkon?
Also, that's a question for me. I just zoned out when you said, if I'm a dev. Well, Olav, you are a dev.
And for those who didn't get the introduction, I'm probably the poorest dev in O3C, and I'm...
If you want to see Olav's development skills, go to stats.o3c.no and you will see a full breakdown of the cybersecurity market in Norway, and Olav has fully automated that. So... no,
me and my good friends GPT and Gemini.
So moving back to the topic at hand, and I kind of get some flashbacks, Audun, to why I remember thinking we need to have you on the podcast. Developers like to make things that are of high quality. That archetype is my experience as well. There's like this old outdated notion of developers as people that just want to have stuff that runs and go home at the end of the day and really don't care about security, reliability, quality. Like most of these people, I feel like when they discuss with me or disagree with me, it's because they have a valid point. Like, yes, I understand you think I should do this, but due to fact X, Y, and Z, I think that's suboptimal compared to what we're doing right now. And I think that's a very, very important thing to bring up in the discussions we're having as a community. Like, we should focus on high quality applications, not secure applications, because high quality applications are secure and reliable and robust, etc., etc., etc. So how can we kind of shift the view of the community, the security community on this?
Well, I think it's it's a little bit of a mind shift, right? You mentioned that particular archetype. That's a thing that I've also faced a little bit when I talk about these things. I think the really important thing is to sort of talk to yourself about the fact that you will meet in your career, which is that security is not just a technical problem, it's a culture and awareness problem. And that holds true for product development teams as well. And in particular, I think it's really important to bring up to middle management, bring up to product leadership that security is an important measure of quality, because the developers are very easy to convince of this, but they don't have the time. You need to give them the time. You can't just go and take their time. You do need to work on that little middle layer there to enhance culture, in addition to all the technical stuff that needs to be done.
Yeah, definitely agree. For many of our listeners, they come from the exact opposite background of you. They come from security and go into cloud and security engineering. How would you advise them on becoming better software engineers and better cloud engineers to be better equipped to do the development automation stuff you do? Because I feel like you have that background, like you've written production ready code and then learned security. They're the exact opposite. They know security, but they don't know how to write automations or learn programming.
They're used to ClickUpsing, deploying MDMs, EDRs, and all the stuff you mentioned earlier in the episode, I guess.
So how to sort of go from security to becoming a good software engineer? I mean, the most important thing in learning programming is to just go and build things. It doesn't even really need to be security-focused things, but there are a multitude of things in security that, could be vastly improved by someone writing 100 lines of Python. I guess that would be my advice, is to sort of try to go out and build things and then have them fail and crash and learn.
Yeah, and probably feel the same pain as let's call it the pain, sorry, that they're pushing onto the devs, right? If you expect the dev to do X, Y, and Z, then try it yourself, see how it is and how it feels.
Yeah. Try building a simple app and then letting a completely unmuted SAST go crazy and tell you 400 things that aren't real.
Yeah.
And you have to fix those 400 things by tomorrow, because our SLA says that criticals have to be fixed within 24 hours.
Yep.
This kind of automation, cloud, security paradigm is a kind of, in some ways, enabled by CI/CD infrastructure, right? We do a lot of our security automation in CI/CD, the scanning you talked about previously. Which leads to a very high importance on securing our CI/CD, not just for the security stuff, but for like the whole organization. And we have been talking at length about some of this stuff in this podcast previously. But let's say a random corporation hires you and they tell you, we're really stressed out about CI/CD. Where do you start?
I mean, difficult question. I mean, first thing is to sort of just look at the platform provider itself. Is it GitHub Actions? Is it Jenkins? Is it the JetBrains one Build City? Is that TeamCity? And just look up a guide. What's the top 10 dumbest things that people have done with this platform? Try to make sure that we don't do any of those. Where possible, I would strongly advocate to move to entirely Dockerized or containerized solutions, because containers are easier to reason about and easier to document and automatically scan. So both, to the extent that's possible, I would wish that your CI/CD pipeline is containerized, both the application that you're producing, but also the actual running of things, basically. Anything that can get described by an SBOM, I'm much happier to run. Make sure that you go through service accounts, credentials, ensure least privilege, minimal dependencies when you need to pull them in. These types of things. But that's pretty much the first 5 things that come to mind.
Because I find it very fascinating that we are some organizations are super strict about procuring new software, for example. But then the same organization just pulls in some random untrusted code in a context which has owner on a project or something like that, which is super interesting. A super interesting approach to the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I now remember one of the things we discussed last time was GitHub Actions. We
Yes.
met actually right after the TJ Actions
Yes.
review dog incident.
Yep.
And you told me at that point you were working on a Go tool
Yeah.
to make it make that attack impossible. Did you, or impossible, at least harder? Did you continue working on that tool, or did you decide to wait for GitHub immutable actions?
I'm not gonna wait on GitHub immutable actions. I don't. Since Microsoft seems to at least I checked up on it after you mentioned it to me. Microsoft doesn't seem to be communicating anything about its status. No. So to sort of summarize the idea that I had that I shared with you, which was to produce a form of lock file for GitHub Actions, where so a lot of tools will warn you today that if you have a workflow file that references another action with a tag or a branch name, at latest or at v43 or /branch, whatever, you will get things like renovate will tell you to not do that, pin it to commit, right? And that's great, but it only secures you one step down. Because if that action in turn has a relative import of that same kind, well, now you're really still just as exposed, but this is out of your control. And what I sort of wanted to do, or what I started speculating about, is two things, really. First is a tool that goes down the path of all of your workflow files and first pins all of yours directly and then goes through any transitive dependencies and sees if they have this particular relative reference pattern and just forks them and pins them and then updates the references in your org. But that's kind of messy. I think it'll work, but it's kind of messy. So another path that I started exploring is the ability to express GitHub Actions as an SBOM. And for anyone who's not familiar with the term, I've used it multiple times. SBOM, software bill of materials. It's just a strict standard for describing the components of a particular software package. So you'll have all your dependencies in exact versions, exactly how they were loaded at the time that the application was built, or in this scenario, the time that the CI/CD flow was ran. What I sort of realized is that you can at least mitigate something if you have an SBOM for GitHub Actions. You can mitigate the attack a little bit by generating the same SBOM every time you ran, and then anytime a tag moves suddenly, produces a new hash, the tag is the same, you produce a failure, you refuse to continue. And I think at least that you could, in theory, run that as a precursor step in GitHub Actions. And I've hacked at it a couple hours here and there. I have made a little bit of progress, but not much. Nothing to share right now.
So be on the lookout for an open source project addressing the supply chain risk of uncommit hashtagged.
Yeah, with the pull request from Olav.
I'm interested in that pull request, Olav. Just trying to add a comment somewhere to be in the contributor list.
I have a question, Håkon, which I'm super eager to ask, and I think you're a really good person to answer this as well. So you have a lot of application security tools, of course, security tools, not going to mention names, giving you a lot of findings, alarms. You talked about it, the noise to a dev. But from my understanding, those tools doesn't necessarily have the context of where that code will run. So they will give you the same importance to fix it, independent of, let's say you have two different applications. One is exposed to internet, the other one is not. And you have the same vulnerability in both. They will flag both of them as super important to fix because it doesn't understand the context of the application. Have you seen, or have you worked with tools that can also prioritize based on the context of the code you're writing, so that the dev, as early as possible, can not only get the finding, but also some explanation of why and the graph and attack path and kind of adding context to the finding as well?
I don't think I've seen anything that has that level of awareness where it's able to be certain that something isn't public in a sense. I think that would just have to be down to, you know, the team or domain knowledge, really, to just know that, but this application isn't accessible in that way. You're gonna just
Would
have
that
to find
help
it muted.
you as a dev, you think, if you could like also not only get all the vulnerability findings, but also the context of them, so you could prioritize better? Or
For sure, anything to help ease the sort of strain of and the amount of work that needs to be done, that would be super useful. But I mean, I would have deploying such a tool in my environment, I would maybe be a little bit concerned that it's overly confident in let's say that it has this like idea that this application is definitely not reachable publicly on the internet, so you know, requests hitting it won't be possible to craft in a malicious way. It would be good to have the sort of knowledge that it's probably like that, but I mean, we all know that you're one bad config away from it being available on the internet and actively exploited.
Yeah.
So it would have to come down to like the really nitty-gritty details of exactly how it works before I could feel comfortable with it.
I just got demoed. Gartner acronym is probably going to be ASPM, so Application Security Posture Management. I'm probably not going to mention the vendor name. That has a very nice like reachability analysis on software composition analysis vulnerability, where it got the vulnerability itself it was a transitive dependency that was vulnerable to something. It got flagged as critical, but was grayed out with the explanation that we don't think this is reachable in your code. So it was like, this is probably not an issue, but if it's an issue, you should know about it. So it's still in your list. You can accept it as unreachable, or you can say, okay, I think you guys, I think your Gen AI reasoning here is off. Which was, I like that approach, and it kind of resonates with what you said as well. Like, I was made aware of it, but it didn't go into my executive report before I did anything with it.
Yeah. I mean, I would be obviously super interested to hear about something like that, but that's, I would be cautious with being too reliant on that analysis, and definitely prefer to just rely on developers being, you know, the experts on their apps, right?
Yeah, it's the thing. I think it was in the cloud threat detection episode where we mentioned, like, if you reach a 0 false positives, you probably have some false negatives as well that you want to know about. So it's very hard to tune. If you tune whatever scanner too hard, you're going to end up with more issues than you had before. You just don't know about them.
Yeah.
So moving to Olav's favorite topic, Go security.
Yes.
I gotta be honest. I decided I work with a client where they write most of their applications in Go. And my background is primarily like mostly C#, .NET, and then a bit of Python the latest couple of years. And then everyone there was writing Go, so I was like, I figure I need to learn a bit of Go. So I wrote just a very easy, like, I have 4 siblings. We do Secret Santa every year, so I was just like, I'm going to automate that, and I'm going to do it in Go. So I wrote that this Christmas, and then I dabbled with Go ever since, but I'm not a great Go developer. Olav is a great one. And you, Audun, said maybe Go security can be an interesting topic. So I don't really have any qualified questions.
Sure.
I'm just...
I can...
just go
but
ahead.
Then I'll, of course, fill in, Håkon. Don't worry about it.
It's good.
If Audun makes mistake, please feel to correct him.
Do call me out. Do call me out. No, when people get pitched Go as a language, context before I start speaking about Go, I've now, in Remarkable, we write a ton of Go. And my first 2 years at Remarkable was just writing Go as my full-time job. And so Go is really great at performance. It's great for being able to run concurrent jobs. It's extremely well made for writing HTTP services, for example. It's got a lot of good ideas. It does have some bad ones as well. I'm not going to dwell too much on those. But it's a pretty good well-made application language. But I think that a lot of people get sort of pitched the wrong language when they hear about it for the first time, because one of the things that people sort of push back on when they get pitched Go as a productivity tool or as a good thing to learn as a programmer is these are the things that I'm mentioning now, right? It's low RAM usage. It's greatly parallelizable. It produces a really small binary, so it can fit on a very small resource service in the cloud. But you'll get a lot of developers who go like, yeah, but sure, so what? Compute's free, basically. And who cares if it takes 5 fewer milliseconds to respond to a customer? They don't care. And while that's sort of a modified truth, I think some of the really interesting stuff that's been happening in Go the last few years is not down to those types of performance gains, but in the developer experience, and in particular in the developer experience with regards to Go. So when Go was written, one of their stated design goals is that Go is supposed to be really easy to statically analyze. That's one of the stated motivations behind creating Go at Google. And because of that, the authors have published really great documentation on writing static analysis tools and have published a bunch of really great static analysis tools for free for anyone to use for Go. And there's a huge community of people who are like sort of people who were making semgrep in Go before semgrep was a thing, or before it was super popular. I'm not going to say before it was a thing, but but my point is just this, that it's really easy to statically analyze, and there have come some really interesting projects from that. So, for example, there's a free open source static analysis tool in Go called GoSec, which is really great, runs super fast, and finds certainly a lot of the sort of silliest mistakes you can make. There's a strict formatter that if it doesn't run through the formatter, the Go doesn't compile. So you also avoid a lot of the sort of stupid conversations that you have to have about formatting in code. And a couple of versions back, I want to say like a year and a half, 2 years ago, the Go team released a tool called Go Vulncheck, which I think is like one of the best reasons to use Go. I would argue is Go Vulncheck's existence, which is a form of it's similar to Dependabot or Renovate in the sense that it looks through your package and sees, hey, you use this package here, it's known to be vulnerable. But the Go team actually maintains their own separate database that runs parallel to CVE database. So they have in that they link to the CVE, but they also contain the exact code that's used on that exact version that is exposed. And what Go Vulncheck does is it actually checks, hey, do you use this code in this way in your package? And if not, well, hey, no problem. So you get to disregard a bunch of false positives just for free with that particular package. There's also one from Google. Google maintains 2 Go-focused teams. They have a official Go team, which is heavily Google, and then there's an in-house Google team that makes Go things. And they made a tool called Caps Lock about a year ago, which is also super fascinating in terms of dependency management, because what it will do is it will, again, using this really great static analysis capabilities that are just Go is designed for, it looks through your code, all your dependencies, and sees what possible system level calls are possible inside this environment. And what you can do, for example, is you can run caps lock on your base application, and then you can run caps lock again on a pull request that gets introduced by Renovate, for example. And you can diff the capabilities. So you can see, this version made this package made a minor bump, but suddenly there are shells being executed inside this package. So you get a little, you should be able to get a little flag that says, hey, maybe don't make this upgrade. this package could be compromised. And these types of capabilities, I think, are really, really, really where Go shines, where you can do this sort of stuff fast. If you have a particular problem you need to solve yourself, it's really easy to get started. It's pretty quick to just make an analyzer yourself if you need it. And so these types of characteristics make Go really exciting to work with from a security perspective. But yeah, also all the things with, having a great standard library also makes Go interesting from a security perspective. There's a lower tendency towards third-party dependencies at all in Go because the standard library is so good.
To your point there, and you said, Håkon, about stats.org.no, which I first built with Python, and remember I'm a bad dev, so this could also be the reason, but with Python, writing that Python, I think I imported 15, 20 packages. With the Go one, I'm quite sure I'm down to 1 or 2. So, which probably then proves your point then. Security-wise, you have a less attack path because you don't import so much code written by the other ones, right?
You have, I think most people find themselves naturally writing code with fewer dependencies in Go. But that's also in part because anytime you look anything up, the community will tell you to just go use the standard library for almost anything.
And the Go cryptography team, or the people focusing on cryptography, are very skilled. I read it was Trail of Bits, I think, who recently did a code review or pen test where there was like 2 findings, and they were informational.
Yes.
Which is having cryptography available easily with high likelihood of succeeding in how you use it is core, right? To the security of the application.
Absolutely. No, that was just massive kudos to that team. I read that report as well. It's extremely impressive what they've been able to do. And again, to sort of ship it as a part of the standard library. It's not a third-party package. It's officially maintained by the Go team. It's really good stuff.
So you would encourage people, if they can, and it's the right use case, you should choose Go over other programming languages.
Yes.
Yeah, with all of those qualifiers, yes. Like with everything else, Go isn't a perfect fit for every environment. There are certainly use cases where I would not use Go.
Front end.
You can.
Okay, you can.
Okay. Yeah. There's some decent projects that.
Seriously? Okay.
Yeah. You can with what's it called? With HTMX and Temple.
Okay.
You can do some really interesting front end stuff in Go. You can. That's another project I have going which I've called Obsessive Gopher, which is where I just try to do absolutely everything in Go.
Nice.
And I found that actually writing front end is not the biggest pain point.
That's completely new knowledge to me. So thank you for that. But it's also quite. I'm not a professional dev, but I find it quite easy to read and understand. As like Python is also, I find it human readable, but you have other languages more memory safe, more memory safe maybe than.
I think it's just memory safe in a different way than typically Rust, for example.
Yeah. So I mean, Go is what you call a garbage collected programming language. Rust is not garbage collected, so you need to think about type safety in a different way. And in Go, you don't, with some exceptions, you don't really need to think about it. But in Rust, you have to think about it all.
But Rust, I don't understand at least. I can't read it.
But Olav, your main problem with the Python code is you didn't read the memo about flatter is better. So you just...
Flatter what?
Yeah, no, I mean, I've heard one of the, I can't recall who it was, but someone on the core Go team once described that the one of the goals of the syntax of Go is to be boring. So it's designed to look extremely non-magical and very straightforward, and that's one of the things that people dislike about Go as well, because it doesn't feel fancy to write. It feels very plain.
Your manager can understand your code. But that's also probably then a huge reason, or a good reason you can start with learning Go if you're new to code, because you can most likely understand what you're writing.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's for many applications. I would argue certainly within REST APIs, gRPC, and CI/CD tooling. I would argue that Go is a pretty good starting point.
Cool.
And I would just, before we end the discussion on learning programming and choosing a programming language, I would just say that kind of what I've experienced is the most important part is learning algorithmic thinking, how to break down the issue into smaller parts and then writing those as functions or whatever. It's not really learning the syntax.
No.
I think that's probably where I would say in the future, Gen AI is going to be the most important, helping people on the syntax, and then they can break down if they can break down the issue into smaller parts themselves. But this episode is not going to be Gen AI.
Well.
Let's look a bit forward in the security space in general, but specifically in security automation. What do you, and these are like large questions, and so you feel free to say, hard question and think of it, but like what's the next big thing in security automation? What do you really want to tackle with automation? Olav, what would you fix with automation in the context you work in?
So it's kind of a bit back to one of our previous points, so it's / question as well. Sorry about that. I'm not sure I'm allowed to ask 2 questions. I'm already at 4, I think. But I feel a lot of companies I work with, they say, our model is DevOps, and so the DevOps teams are responsible for security, and they fix their own security. And then when you start looking into it, you can find that they're not doing security. And the reason might be that their developers are younger and less experienced, don't know how to do it, and it could be that they just don't have time because they're pushed on futures. It would be super nice then in my head to automate then that part of it somewhat scalable to help them. How do you scale that? And 2 different application teams might have 2 completely different needs as well. One has a security champion that low security, the other one has 0 security experience.
I mean, the closest we get to automation there today is a certification, right? Where if you don't do it, you you get in trouble. But I mean, that's again, we're sort of back to that. That's really a culture. That's kind of a culture issue, which are much harder to automate than technical issues. I know that there are companies that, enforce that unless certain checks are applied in GitHub or in whatever CI system you use, that you can't deploy, and then, if you don't do it right, then you get sent on training. To me, that seems really draconian. Also, because from experience, I know that there are lesser sensitive apps where you don't need to do everything.
But that maybe that's something then if you can automate and see which application teams are doing well and which are not doing that well. If you write Go, you can use many of the tools you maybe mentioned earlier today. And then you have, as your team, you have 2 security engineers. It's then easier to prioritize which those 2 should help them. If that's an application security engineer that can go into application team, helping them fix security from the start then.
This year we decided to do a fully technical season of the O3C Cloud Security podcast, but every episode people answer it's about competence and culture. So I guess it's not really about the technical stuff, huh?
I mean, it's about both.
Yeah.
It's you fix and you push the culture in order to achieve the technical means, right? Because if you don't have the culture first, the tech isn't gonna matter in a sense. Because everyone's gonna be fighting you. And you get nowhere.
Okay. Last question didn't work. That's on me as the host. I have a new one. How can our listeners start implementing or improving the security automation in their organization today?
Sure. And I mean, that really kind of goes back to a little bit our first point of conversation, or one of the earlier ones, where I think if your application and your workflow isn't containerized, that's the first thing to really do. Just because, again, containers are easier to reason about. And once you can reason about your container, you can minimize your container, make it as small as possible while operating. And then you can subject both your container file and your final running container to really great analysis. I find that things that run against containers and container files tend to be low noise and pretty good at accurately describing real vulnerabilities. So again, if you don't do that, that's where I would start and move on to, again, just fixing your dependencies. If you're certainly, if you're in a scenario where you're doing nothing, first thing is just make sure that your dependencies are up to date.
I think I have a different one, a suggestion, which I want feedback on. I think maybe the first thing I would do is high fidelity secret scanning and testing if they are valid or alive, and then automating, modularizing workload identity federation, managed identities, OIDC in some way to remove as many as possible of them. I think that's where I would start. That's probably because I've been thinking about OIDC for the last 2 months.
Oh, but I think that's that's really valid starting point as well. Again, it's sort of that both of these sort of fit in the category of fairly easy to implement and really high value, and super terrible impact on you if you do nothing about it.
But I guess if you also write really good tests in your code, it's easier to patch the dependencies because.
If you have a good test suite, it's easy to see if a renovate update breaks your build.
And I spoke with someone in a Norwegian organization who used their threat modeling output to write tests for the applications themselves, based on let's say business logic abuse use cases, for example, which you can include in the same test case or test suite.
Yeah. That's a really interesting place to start. Sort of go from the threat model and define some tests from there. That's a really good idea.
Go from the threat model. Did you hear that? That's the answer.
Or you go the opposite. Instead of fixing stuff, you automate the creation of metrics, or like the quality metric, and then you use that to decide where to spend your time on building culture and competence, and then maybe they start building some automations themselves.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Audun, it's been really interesting. Maybe especially the talk about Go security.
I learned so much when you talked about Go and Go security, so I agree.
I feel bad for your LinkedIn inbox because Olav is going to be in it with just his poor code, being like, I can't make this work.
I'm very fine with that.
I'm going to ask Remarkable to get 20% of your time. How expensive that's going to be, I don't know yet.
And then this is the place in the podcast where you are allowed to plug whatever you want to plug, if you have anything to plug.
Sure. I mean, I have like a million ideas of things to do, and at least 13 blog posts in my head at any given time that I never publish. If I ever do, they'll be on my LinkedIn. So, follow me there.
Very, very easy. Go follow him on LinkedIn. And we're going to put all the Go projects down below on YouTube and in the description on YouTube. And once again, thank you so much for being on. And to our listeners, stay safe.